an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Rule of Wolves, chapters 9, 10, and 11. Zoya, Nina, and again Zoya. In these chapters, Nina almost is found out by the Queen of Fjerda, which feels like the worst possible solution to what could happen to her. And there's this there's a demon standing next to Nikolai now. It's not even just I don't like it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. I am really enjoying this book a lot. I really, really am. There's so much. I just keep being taken by surprise by the direction things go in, And there is a lot of internal stuff happening with Zoya that I appreciated a lot here. And also, I am fascinated by the potential of what happened to Hana. So, starting off with Zoya, I mentioned that I accidentally started this chapter last week and kind of spoiled myself to the fact that Nikolai gets hurt, but somehow that just wound up ramping the tension up even more. He is not actually that injured, as it turns out. But he's in quite a bit of pain because getting burned is not a fucking joke. It's the worst kind of injury. It can do the kind of damage that you can't fix. It causes the kind of pain that you just sort of have to get through it until it wears away. It's just so brutal. And she's asking the healer who's working on him whether or not they can give him anything more for the pain. And they're like, I could give him more, but I don't think he'd wake up from it. And I, can put him into a coma. And Nikolai immediately is like, nope, no, absolutely not. And she realizes that is because he has been in that state due to his demon before. They have had to put him under with that draft that they've made. And it just reminds him of that. So even if it's actually medically helpful here, he doesn't want to do it again. So he grips Zoya's hand here in a way that she predicts will cause the healer to gossip, because there's no way that he couldn't have noticed it. And what happens as this man is treating Nikolai is a constant, anytime she gets up to leave, Nikolai goes, where is she? Where's my general? And she has to say she's here and come back to him. And there is this moment that is so significant. Don't go, he said, still half asleep. I have to bathe. I smell like a forest fire. You smell like wildflowers. You always do. What can I say to make you stay? His words trailed off into a drowsy mumble as he fell back asleep. Tell me it's more than war and worry that makes you speak those words. Tell me what they would mean if you weren't a king and I weren't a soldier. But she didn't want to hear any of that. Not really. Sweet words and grand declarations were for other people, other lives. She brushed the hair back from his face, placed a kiss on his forehead. I would stay forever if I could, she whispered. He wouldn't remember anyway. And part of me is like, wouldn't he? Or would he? I don't know what the fuck this demon is capable of anymore. And for all I know, it could be acting like a fucking Ring security system, keeping track of what she's saying while he is out and then reporting to him later. And if it did, what would it even mean? I don't know. But honestly, that's not the important part. What's important here is her saying, that she doesn't want to hear any declaration anyway, because that is for other people. And later on, she's thinking something really similar about herself in comparison to Genya. Genya is, having this moment with David, and she's watching the two of them and realizing how at ease they are with one another and how good they are together. And she thinks that some people are made for love and some for war. And it's the kind of thing that people tell themselves when they don't really think there's another option. And they just have to make it so that it's bearable right now. It's not actually about whether that's true. It's about convincing themselves there isn't another way to live. There isn't, she is so aware that the position that she currently holds, there is no chance that her and Nikolai can be together. So what's the point in even fantasizing about it? She's so pragmatic, and this is part of what I enjoy so much about her character, is that I relate to this. I don't like to think about things that aren't possible, that I really know are not possible. And I can't help but think there might be a way for the two of them to wind up together eventually. But as things stand right now, she is absolutely correct. There is no other way for things to go than for him to make an alliance with a queen of standing from another country, or a princess or whatever, and her marrying him would present no solution to the issue that they have with this war and needing allies. It's not even... This is what I love about the situation as it's been drawn here, is there is very little doubt that the two of them feel for each other. We aren't under any delusions. She cares about him, and he obviously really cares about her. Every time we're in each of their POVs, we know that. There isn't even doubt between the two of them in their POVs. They seem each aware, but the practical nature of what's happening is not just, oh, it's tradition, I have to do this for my family. Any of the many sort of romance storylines that are out there, where if you just were willing to buck convention, or if my family were just able to get money some other way than me marrying money. But this is a war, the alliance and the factor of, troops that it brings, that is a very distinctive thing that cannot be circumvented in any way that I know of at the moment. And it just feels truly insurmountable in a way that works just exceptionally well for two characters whose primary motivations are always duty to the people. Both of them are so honorable and so concerned with the people of Ravka and their well-being. It's not even a question of doing the right thing. Each of them is so careful to avoid even entertaining the fantasy because it feels dangerous. And I love this. It's just so well done, and it makes it feel so much more painful. And it also underlines how perfect they are for one another, So anyway, this continuing sort of mantra of, that's not for me, I don't get to live that life, comes up over and over again. And I think that she has gotten herself to really believe it. I don't think it's true, but it's hard to argue with it when this is the situation she's in at the moment, So she is sort of traumatized over seeing these women burned to death in front of her. She is enjoying having company in her sitting room, even though she didn't ask anybody to be there. And normally she's get the fuck out. At this time, she's really grateful. And she sits down with, a cup of tea, and I love this. She had curled up beside Genya on the couch next to the fire. Its cushions were embroidered in pewter silk, and usually she was fussy about people putting their feet up on it, but right now she couldn't have cared less. She took a long sip from her mug of warmed wine. Tea was not enough for her tonight. Okay, I said she had tea. I lied. My bad. David and Nadia sat at the round table at the room's center. He'd set out neat little stacks of papers in what was no doubt an important order and was buried in a long row of calculations. And I love this. Genya is designing the wedding gown and is asking her opinion. And they're talking about whether or not they could hold it in the gardens because the chapel is just kind of gloomy and not ideal for having an event that's supposed to be joyful and, bright and open. And Nikolai strides in, says it was as if he'd never been hurt, never been helpless. He had bathed, dressed in fresh clothes, and the man seemed to gleam with confidence. And there's this discussion about what happened, and they said, who is? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the spot. Here it is. Tamar says this was a message from Queen Maki. She rolled the dice, and she almost won. If she had killed Ares, she would have had cause for war, and she would have tied up the loose ends of her assassination scheme. And I'm really curious because, obviously there wouldn't be witnesses that I know of to report back that my question is, saying she would have had cause for war, I'm very curious about what cause she could come up with. She's having her guards kill her sister, or attempt to kill. We find out that she's still alive, but it's really unclear whether or not she's going to make it. And I don't know how she turns that around to that Ravka did it to her sister. I mean, it just does, I'm really curious about the way that she would spin it and what kind of false witness she would be able to sort of, bring up. And I don't really understand how that would work. I have no doubt it could, but I just don't really understand how it would. And they wonder if the queen will come to the wedding. And Tamar says, well, yeah, she'll come, but I wouldn't doubt that she might use it to try something again. And this is when they start talking about her mother creating a policy of outlawing experimenting on Grisha. And it turns out she reversed it. Even before she was crowned, Maki had her own ideas about how to strengthen Shuhan. When Jorda Parem was discovered, it was presented her with a choice. She could have attempted to keep the secret by destroying Bayor's work, and instead she chose to start up the old laboratories and make use of Parem as a weapon. That's what led to the Kergud. And this is something that I don't feel like had been explicitly said, but we find out that the Kergud are actually regular people. I have been laboring this entire time under the delusion that the Kergud are Grisha who have been altered by other Grisha with Parem and also had been given Parem. But they are regular people tailored by Grisha on Parem. And there is something extra scary to me about the fact that what's going on is leading to other people being targets of this now. The Grisha, I've grown accustomed to them being the persecuted group. And that feels like something very specific that I can point to and be like, these are the people that need to worry. But now I'm finding out that because this had been mentioned before and I just really hadn't quite put it together, that, the guard that was pretending to be the princess, she was coerced into playing the role that she did in attempting to assassinate Nikolai, coerced by the threat of her brother being made into a Kergud. And for some reason, I assumed that meant her brother was Grisha. And I don't know why I thought that, because we don't get any sense that she's Grisha. And if they are twins, the likelihood of him being Grisha and her not feels low to me. So I think I should have realized that that wasn't how it worked. But yeah, so finding out here that basically any soldier could be selected to be part of this like horrific process at the hands of people who have themselves been drugged and enslaved into it. This is all so grim. And, you know, when we are in Maki's head, we do get the sense of how incredibly ruthless she is. But I don't feel like it quite sank in for me how ruthless until this section and finding out that, like, she literally went in and reversed her mother's policies. I mean, that takes a kind of determination. It's not just that she's carrying on something that had been going on. It is her going, oh, I know that these people had protection and we can't have that. I'm undoing it. And that feels, there's something about that that feels extra intense to me, and that might not be really fair. But I just think it shows a pointed determination to punish people versus the kind of ambivalence that could just continue to be carried out by somebody who hasn't really stopped to think about things quite enough to wonder if they're continuing something evil or not. You know what I mean? There's that can happen where it's just the way things have been done, and I will continue to carry them on as they have been done because it's tradition and that's how it goes. And then I actually think the rights that we granted are probably too much. Oh, really? Okay. I mean, I just didn't really realize how fucking much of a monster she was. So let's see. The Grisha they bring to the labs are referred to as volunteers, but we know better. The choices the Grisha are presented with are impossible ones. The power the Taban government wields is too absolute. And Genya says, so it's not a choice at all. And Tolia says it's the same way the Darkling built the Second Army. And Zoya gets a little bit heated about that and says that was a refuge. And Tolia says, maybe for some. The Darkling took Grisha from their parents when they were only children. They were taught to forget the places they came from and the people they knew. They served the crown or their families suffered. What kind of choice is that? But no one experimented on us. No, they just turned you into soldiers and sent you out to fight their wars. And this is just such an interesting perspective because, you know, Zoya was one of the Darklings favored. And of course, part of it was because she had more intense power. She was extraordinarily beautiful. And she had been rescued, so she felt a sense of devotion and indebtedness to him that is extremely useful, right? And I don't think she ever really stopped to consider what he was doing to other people who weren't in the situation she was, where it was genuinely a relief for her to be gathered into some place that felt like a family. And she never had a feeling of safety anywhere she'd been. 9 years old and her mother is willing to sell her off, you know? And just the fact that she hadn't ever really stopped to think about the fact that she just happened to be in such a bad position that it wound up being better for her to be with the Darkling than otherwise, but that isn't necessarily the situation for most of the people. It's interesting. I hadn't really stopped to think about the fact that she might have been in a unique position to feel like this was a better situation for her and everyone else had been coerced. So yeah, they talk about what their lives would have been like if he hadn't done it. And she's thinking about the way that she was like walking down the aisle. This moment reminded her not to trip on the hem of her little golden wedding dress as Zoya's father sat silent in the pews. He'd hung his head, Zoya remembered, but he hadn't said a word to save her. Would it have been a better thing for Liliana to have put her on a ship to cross the true sea instead of bringing her to the palace gates to join the Grisha? Nikolai had abolished the practice of separating Grisha from their parents. There was no mandatory draft to pull children from their homes. But for the Grisha who had no homes, who had never felt safe in the places they should feel safe, the little palace would always be a refuge, somewhere to run. Zoya had to preserve that sanctuary no matter what the Fjerdans or the Shu or the Kirch threw at them. And maybe, somewhere on the other side of this long fight, there was a future where Grisha wouldn't have to fear or be feared, where soldier would just be one of 1,000 possible paths. And finally, she gets up and she says, "Your Majesty, we've been putting this off long enough." And I was like, putting off what? It's so abrupt, you know. And Genya asks if she wants company and seems extremely anxious. And I was like, wait, what's going on? And it turns out that they are going to see the Darkling. It is such a wild scene. Y'all, I can't with the fact that they are entertaining anything this man says. And I get it. I really do. They don't have a lot of other options. I am not even in disagreement with their stance that it's, quote, worth a try, which is the way that David phrases it later. It's more that I just absolutely do not believe anything that comes out of this man's... He has just been such a liar. You know, there are some characters who deceive, but they never explicitly lie. So you get this sort of false, maybe, but nevertheless, you get this sort of sense that it's possible to trust them if only you know the way their mind works and can perhaps preemptively cut off the kind of treachery that they may have been thinking of. Like the Fae, you know, if you just manage to close all your loopholes and figure out a way to keep them from being able to build a loophole into whatever agreement they're making with you, which is very tricky, you can maybe get the outcome that you are after. But what we actually are doing here is trusting somebody who has explicitly lied, who has, there's nothing about any interactions we've ever had with him that leads me to believe that he's necessarily telling the truth or that anything is, you know what I mean? So it's just really rough, this whole scene. They go in to see him, and Zoya is like on the edge of absolutely losing her shit the entire time. Zoya felt a sudden rush of his resentment, his rage at this captivity, the Darkling's anger. The dragon's presence in her head had left her vulnerable. She drew in a breath, grounding herself here in this strange glass cell, the stone floor beneath her boots. And I was like, a glass cell? And then I was like, oh, they're keeping him from shadow so that in case he does have any ability left, it won't be easy for him to wield it, which I thought was a really neat idea, but I really do wonder, like, well, what happens when it gets dark? How does this go? And yeah, I love too that he's like got no shirt on because, as he puts it gets very warm in here. And she's just like, yeah, no, he's just vain. He just wants to be looked at. So this is when they talk about what's going on. And essentially he says, killing me is not going to stop the expansion of the fold. It's not going to work. And my price for telling you how to stop it is going to be speaking to Alina Starkov. Bringing Alina back into the story from Zoya's perspective will be very interesting. I don't want an Alina POV personally, because I just haven't enjoyed her as a character, but it would be sort of interesting to see a POV of hers written so long after the original trilogy was written, because it feels like it would show off Leigh Bardugo's growth as a writer more than anything else, in a way. So there's a part of me that's a little curious, but I also prefer to stay in Zoya's head. I don't know. And there's like a conversation about where everything went wrong. And for him, he says it's putting the trust I did in a pirate named Sturmhond. And Zoya's like, that's where it went wrong? Not in manipulating a young girl and trying to steal her power, or destroying half a city of innocent people, or decimating the Grisha, or blinding your own mother. None of those moments feel like an opportunity for self-examination. You list off atrocities as though I'm meant to feel shame for them. And perhaps I would, were there not 100 that preceded those crimes, and another 100 before those. Human life is worth preserving, but human lives, they come and go, like so much chaff, never tipping the scales. What a remarkable calculation, said Nikolai, and a convenient one for a mass murderer. And I love this, that Zoya is just really on the edge of losing it completely. And she's just not sure how it is that Nikolai is managing to keep himself so calm. And I'm wondering that myself. Is it just because he wasn't personally victimized by this man the way that others were, the way that Zoya was? You know, does it have something to do with the way that he is able to sort of like separate himself from the demon these days? I don't know. And when they say that like killing him might do it, he says, well, the demon lives on and you're king, you'll have to kill him too. The only way to heal the rupture in the fold is to finish what you started and perform the obisbaya. And they talk about getting another thornwood from monks. And when she's like, excuse me, where, who, he admits that he doesn't know, but he thinks he can tell them how to find them. What will this knowledge cost us? Bring me Alina Starkov, and I'll tell you what you need to know. All the humor left Nikolai's face. What do you want with Alina? A chance to apologize. A chance to see what became of the girl who drove a knife into my heart. I don't believe a word that leaves her mouth. I might not either, but you know my terms. And if we don't agree to them, then the fold will keep expanding and swallow the world. The young king will fall, and I will sing myself to sleep in my prison cell. And Zoya rightfully is like, even if he gave us this information, we would need a fabricator of huge strength to do the thing. And the Darkling says, does this mean you have not mastered all Juris set out to teach you? Which, how the fuck does he know that? How does he know about it? Just because he was like around the saints, his body was? Like, I didn't think, unless it's partially what the monk knew as well? Yuri? I don't know how he knows this, but yeah, this is where she almost really loses it. She's lunged for him and Nikolai has to like hold her back, literally. And there is a kind of funny moment. How she struggles like an insect pinned by her own power. Poetic, said Nikolai. You have something in your beard. To Zoya's confusion, the Darkling raised his hand to smooth his chin, then dropped it as if he'd been burned, his gaze lit with something very like hate. That's what I thought. Yuri Vedinin is still there somewhere inside you. Is that why your power hasn't returned? The Darkling watched the king with narrowed eyes. Such a clever fellow. That's why you want us to raise the Thornwood and perform the Obisbaya. You could care less what damage the fold does. You want to purge yourself of Yuri and become host to my demon. You want a way back to your power. I've told you what I want. Bring me Alina Starkov. That's the bargain. I can live as a weakling and you can watch the world die. Then we go to Nina. And Hana, reminder, Nina's last chapter ended with the collapse of the prince. And I had thought he had been poisoned. It seems not. Maybe I'm wrong, and it was, or he has been. And it's just sort of an ongoing thing, but it doesn't seem like it. I don't know. But Hana begins using her ability to heal him right in front of everyone. And Nina has to take a moment to pray over, like she has to tell Hana, hold my hand and pray loudly. As the waters scour the riverbed, let them cleanse me too. As the waters scour the riverbed, let them cleanse me too. And his breathing begins to regulate, and then when they get pulled away, because they're not supposed to touch a prince, this is like extremely not within the regulation of the behavior of royals versus the court, he instantly can tell that pulling her away is making him worse again, and he calls for them to be brought back. So they get ushered into a different room, and this whole time Nina is like, there is no way that Hana used her ability in front of her father and he didn't notice. There is no way. There is no way. It turns out there is a way. It seems very much like he didn't notice. And it's sort of a weird thing that I don't really know how to like it because of the way he reacts to his daughter later. I might have thought he was only biding his time and pretending that he didn't notice, because that's what he did with Nina before. He played along with her, even though he knew who she was. And then once he got her alone, all of a sudden dropped the bomb that he is fully aware. So I was kind of thinking that maybe that was what was going on here. But because there's a moment later where he tells his daughter, hold your head high, do not, let your pride leave you. And she says, never. And he smiles with like pride in his face. And that made me feel like he couldn't like summon that reaction while still, if he had seen what she actually did. I don't feel like he's that good an actor. I may be wrong, but yeah. And what we get before, the conversation takes place later is him basically talking about his appalling weakness. The broom holds the prince in complete contempt. And Ylva calls the prince a child, and Broom says, he's 18. You forget because he's so far from what a man should be. At that, Hannah's gaze hardened. He cannot help what he is, how he was born. Maybe not, but has he pushed himself? Challenged himself? I've done my best to help him, to be a mentor and guide. He is the heir to the throne, but if the extent of his infirmity became common knowledge, do you really think Fjerda would accept him as their king? And again, this is like feeling like maybe somebody had tried to get rid of the prince and it didn't work just now, and this is interfering with his plans yet again. I don't know. I just really feel like something is up. And Ylva says, why did you never tell me the prince's case was so dire? Our position at court and my position with the military are closely tied to the favor of the royal family. After the prison break and the destruction of the treasury, I've had to fight for our place here, and I could not risk indiscretion. They will do everything they can to minimize this incident and discredit those who witnessed it most closely. And essentially what he says is, Hana watched him fall to the ground and was close to him. She had his blood on her clothes because of his coughing fit. She knows how bad it is, and they will try to silence her, either through violence or exile. Which is actually perfect, because it makes the fact that they get taken separately to his rooms seem a lot more reasonable and in line with what he is afraid of. So they get summoned, just the two of them. And on their way, they're discussing like whether or not her father saw. And Nina says, or thinks she couldn't believe Hana had healed the prince before Brim's very eyes without his knowledge, but people saw what they wanted to see. And part of me thinks that's true. It's the kind of thing where if this had, a different writer would have handled this situation a little differently. And forgive me, I always use whatever it is that I've most recently read as kind of like a comparing stick for things when I run across similar plot points. But I just finished the first 5 books in the Percy Jackson series, which I did not love. And those books, which I don't feel were well written, would have handled this in such a way that we would ignore the fact that it seems wild that he didn't see it. It would have like not been mentioned. We would have just assumed that they got away with it. Leigh Bardugo is choosing to highlight how unlikely it is. And for me, that feels like a choice a writer is making to heighten the tension, make it clear our characters are not idiots so that they would be worried about the same things the readers are worried about and wouldn't be more likely to believe something just happened to, work out in their favor. And also to give us this moment of people saw what they want to see, which honestly feels like a little bit of a cheat, but is also exactly how humans work. And so I feel like the addressing it directly, for me, works completely in acting like he just didn't see. I'm willing to buy it. If it turns out he did and he was pretending not to have seen her this whole time, I will also buy that. But I am completely willing to accept that he saw something and didn't really process it or won't let himself process it. So they get brought into the prince's presence. And there is a moment here where they're speaking to a guard and he is very curt and very and then later on the prince says something. I trust Joran with my life. I have to. We have no secrets from each other. Nina noted the slight clenching of Joran's jaw. Interesting. Maybe some secrets after all. And I was like, what does that mean? Does Nina think that he's in love with his guard? Is that what's being suggested here? That maybe they're And if so, I'm very interested in that. I want to know some more about what's going on there, but I couldn't tell if that was what she was meaning or not. And this is when he says, I don't seem to take after either of my parents unless there was a goblin somewhere in the Grimger line. It's all right. I'm not going to let them exile you. Go ahead and pour yourselves tea. Nothing will happen to you. I forbade it. I threw quite the fit. There are benefits to being able to turn blue. I love this. He's actually kind of delightful. I can't remember a time I wasn't an object of scorn or worry. I'm often not sure which is worse. Other people shy away from my weakness. You drew closer. Sickness is sickness, said Hana. It's not something to fear. And I've started to wonder, is this prince, is he Grisha? Because all I keep thinking is about when when Alina wasn't able to use her powers, and actually Nina as well, because she wound up, the Parem changed her abilities in such a way that tapping into them became really difficult because she didn't understand that things were inverted. So she also kind of wasted away and got really ill because she wasn't able to use her ability, which sort of helps the life force of Grisha. Is that possibly going on here also? I don't know. And Hana is healing him as he starts coughing here from across the room, I think, is what's being suggested. I thought that you had to be in physical contact, but the way Nina is looking at her, I think that maybe she's doing it from afar. Like, the fact that we found out Hana can grow her hair makes me wonder if she's got more ability than usual in this department. And so that makes it that she can, heal from afar. So he says, your hair is shorn. That's a sign of devotion to Gel, is it not? It is. And you both prayed over me. You took my hand. People have been executed for daring to touch the hand of a prince. It was not I, said Nina piously. It was the spirit of Gel that moved through me. So you are true believers. Are you not? Asked Nina. It is hard to believe in a god that would deny me breath. And I love that both of them just don't say anything, because that's blasphemy, but they don't get to be like, Prince, that's blasphemy. And finally, he says, when he's like, the fact that you are knowledgeable about herbs isn't really the usual noblewoman's oeuvre. And she's like, yeah, I'm not the usual noblewoman. And he says, okay, I can see that. The two of you have made me feel a lot better. And I would like it if you would come see me again soon, because I find your presence comforting. Jorn will see you back to your rooms. Give my regards to your father. There was no mistaking the sour edge to his voice. So, Broom's disdain had not gone unnoticed. And I love this so much. When they're heading back, Hana is like, the spirit of Gel moved through you? You are shameless. But then Nina gets separated from Hana and led to see the queen. The stone here seemed older, its color closer to ivory than white, and when she looked up, she saw that the walls had been carved into ridges so that it felt they were passing through the rib cage of some great beast, a tunnel of bones. This place had been built to intimidate, but the ancient architects of the Ice Court had chosen the wrong motif. Death is my gift, Nina thought, and I do not fear the lost. She always made sure to have 2 thin spikes of bone tucked into her sleeves to use as darts if she needed to. Her buttons were bone too. And then, of course, there were the dead. The guards stopped in front of 2 tall, narrow doors that reached almost all the way to the ceiling. They were emblazoned with the Grimsure wolf rampant, a globe beneath its paw and a crown hovering above its pointed ears. The doors opened, and Nina found herself in a long room lined by columns carved to look like birch trees. The whole place glowed blue, as if it really had been hewn from ice, and Nina felt like she was entering a frozen forest. This sounds dope as hell. I'm just saying. They've got style. There's no denying. I love it. So, the queen is seated on a throne so elaborately carved it looked like sheets of lace. Her back was straight, her sleek hair the color of pearl, and she wore a circlet of opals on her head. And I'm like, this bitch sounds like a fucking boss, honestly. She sounds like Queen Mab. And this lady is essentially like, yo, what's up? Nobody knows who you are. And a lot of your story seems way too convenient. So I'm checking you out because I kind of wonder if you're a spy. And Nina, as it turns out, has based her entire character on a real woman who ran away, and she has been tailored to look like that woman. So a cursory description should cover if they go to like this person's village and say, do you know Mila Yanderstadt? Does she look like, tell me what she looks like. That will still work for Nina. But if they bring back somebody who knew her to the court and have them like stand in front of her, that might not be successful. Like the tailoring, it doesn't seem was that close. It was just adequate. So I have sent men to inquire about this Mila, and Nina's just like, well, I have nothing to fear. I am who I say I am. It might be easier just to send you packing, but I think that might cause him some distress, and I want to know what happened today. Now Nina understood. Broom hadn't questioned the prince's quick recovery. Not even Prince Rasmus himself had. But the queen had a mother's care, a mother's fear, and a mother's hope. She'd chosen to interrogate Mila, not Hana, because she knew Mila was defenseless, without name or status. If Mila wanted the queen's favor, if she wanted to stay at the ice court, and if she knew something about Hana or what had happened, Mila was more likely to talk. And Nina intended to do just that. So, Nina, at this point, reaches out to basically the feeling of death surrounding her. And this is so interesting the way it's written. Speak. Nina reached out with her power, feeling the cold river of mortality that ran through everyone and everything, letting it carry her to the sacred burial ground that lay in the shadow of the elder clock only a few hundred yards away. Who will speak the name of Agatha Grimshair, Queen of Fjerda? The voice that answered was loud and clear, a strong soul, recently gone. It had a great deal to say. 6 miscarriages, Nina said. What? You miscarried 6 times before you gave birth to Rasmus, not 3. Who told you that? You had given up on praying, so you had a Grisha healer brought from the dungeons to see you through your pregnancy. That is a lie. You think your boy is cursed, but he is not. If what you were saying were true, then I would have committed heresy. My son would have been born with the demon's mark upon him, forsaken by Jel. There would be no hope for him no matter how many prayers I said. Nina felt almost sorry for this woman, a helpless mother wanting only to give birth to a healthy child. But once Rasmus had been born and weaned, she'd sent the Grisha healer who had helped her to her death. She couldn't risk anyone learning of what she'd done. Only Lenore knew, her dear friend, a friend so beloved, the queen had refused to let her travel with her husband to the front. I need you with me, Agatha had said, and a queen's need was as good as a command. Lenore's husband had died on the field of battle, and Lenore had remained year after year on the White Island, her grief turning bitter as she tended to a selfish queen and her sickly son. When I was a little girl, said Nina, I fell into a river. It was the dead of winter. I should have frozen. I should have drowned. But when my parents found me lying on the banks nearly 2 miles from where I'd fallen in, I was warm and safe, my cheeks pink and my heart beat even. I was blessed by Jel. I was touched by his far-seeing. Ever since then, I have known things I had no right to know. And I know this. Your son is not cursed. And I really like this because so much of the time when somebody is trying to fake being a seer, they will say somebody is cursed and that they can help to lift the curse. But instead, what Nina is trying to do is to give this woman some comfort, because this woman will value Nina for being a voice that is denying what this woman fears most and saying that isn't actually happening and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And also because Nina is a representative of Jel, allegedly, it feels like absolution to what she did by utilizing a Grisha in the past. And I love, too, when the queen asks, why is he suffering then? She says, there is a purpose to all of it and to your suffering as well. Your son will heal and grow strong, and he will find greatness. The queen drew in a long, trembling breath. Nina knew she was struggling to keep tears at bay. Leave me, she said, her voice quaking. Nina curtsied and backed from the room. Before the doors closed, she heard a sound like wailing as the queen went to her knees, her head in her hands. And that's the end of Nina's chapter, and that was fucking intense, y'all. Nina keeps being in these positions where I think that she's been spotted, and I love that, you know, it's the kind of thing that if it were a different sort of story, I might not actually be that worried about her, but because Nina has been caught out before, the precedent has been set that some people can see through her shit, and that she isn't always safe. So I genuinely have had more than one moment of like, oh, fuck this again. So then we go to chapter 11, Zoya. I love, they're coming back from the meeting with the Darkling. He's fun, said Nikolai, pouring a glass of brandy. I forgot how fun he is. Oh, God. So they talk about the pros and cons of bringing Alina into this. And there's an interesting moment where he points out that she's wearing the watch he gave her. And she says, well, you should have given me a raise, actually. Or maybe you should give me an estate. And she says, I choose the dacha in Udova. I actually don't know what dacha is. Let me look this up. What does dictionary have to say about that? A country house or cottage in Russia typically used as a second or vacation home. Originally, grant of land. Okay, noted. And he asks why she wants it. And she says she likes the view. And when he's like, there's no view, she says, I know. I grew up at the town that it looks at. And this is the first time she's ever spoken of herself. Anything private. And not just to him. What she tells him, she's never told anyone. I haven't spoken to my parents since they tried to sell me off to a rich nobleman when I was 9 years old. She'd let her life, her family, and her losses stay in the past, but lately it felt hard not to be known. Like keeping herself together was all the more difficult without someone to see who she truly was. I love that. That feels so true. Like she's struggling with this weird voice in her head that keeps egging her on and criticizing her and driving her to do things. And this loss of self, it's very natural that she would be rehashing her own past more and need almost like reinforcement from someone else, knowing what she has been through to help her, you know? Nikolai set down his glass. That's not, the law prohibits. Who enforces the laws? Zoya asked softly. Rich men. Rich men who do what they wish. Ugh. 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 It's so true. And then they start talking about the things like pretty naturally actually turn away from this. It doesn't sound like it would. It sounds like somebody would have very purposefully changed the subject, but honestly, it's very natural to me. The Darkling will be vulnerable too, and this is the time to attempt it. We don't know when or if his power may return, and I have no intention of letting him banish Yuri. You mean to drive the Darkling out instead? He's the invader. The little monk is still in there. You saw that. You must not underestimate him. Zoya. What? Zoya, look at me. Zoya turned and gasped. She raised her hands to fight, her glass slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. Nikolai stood beside the table, and the demon stood beside him. It seemed to hover there, a blot of darkness in the shape of her king, its black wings curling at the edges like smoke. The monster is me, and I am the monster. If the Darkling is right, and this isn't all some ruse, the Obisbaya may be the secret to unraveling the fold once and for all. The demon may go out of me and into the darkness forever. But he is my demon, not the Darkling's. I really do enjoy that because taking ownership of it changes something for me. Previous, it's been the Darkling invading him, violating him, you know? And by being like, no, This is mine now. It just gives him a kind of power over it. I like it. And Nikolai held his hand out to her, scarred beneath the gloves he wore. Don't be afraid. She felt the need in him as palpably as if he'd spoken. Don't turn away from me. Anyone but you. Was that the dragon's eye opening inside her, or did she just recognize her own want? There was no one else she would trust to see her at her weakest, her most fearful, her most monstrous. And she steps closer. And what if I told you the demon would always be with me? That there will always be a part of me tied to the Darkling. Would I still be your king, or would you fear me? Would you come to despise me as you despise him? She didn't know how to answer that. She had always assumed that somehow, eventually, they would find a way to rid Nikolai of this creature. Maybe she wanted to attempt the Obispaya again despite the terrible risk to his life, not for the sake of destroying the fold, but because she hated that any part of him resided within the king. I love this so much. This shadow raises its hand and unties the knot of ribbon in her hair. And because of how we know Nikolai is always like eyeballing the ribbon in her hair, it just feels like the manifestation of the thing he wants, and this darkness sort of getting to indulge in that a little. And the fact that it's solid enough to touch is unexpected. She wasn't ready for that. Let's see. You would still be my king. I know who you are. Was it the monster touching her, or was it her king? Was there a difference anymore? The demon closed its talons over the ribbon in her hair and tugged. The thing melted back into Nikolai's body as if his shadow had come to meet him. And she has a couple more drinks. You really think that it's worth attempting to find these monks? I do. I don't know, said Zoya. This stunt to see Alina, it feels like he's stalling, or he has some other plan. I'm sure he does. But we need to find a way to stop the spread of this blight. If the Fjerdans weren't breathing down our necks, if the wedding weren't right around the corner, we might try to master this phenomenon without him. But David's focused on winning the war. We need him. And yeah, I think this there's this moment when she says Alina gave up her power to defeat him. She'll probably want to murder both of us for managing to bring him back. Nikolai gave a rueful laugh. The worst part is I don't think she would have fallen for his scheme. She would have taken one look at Elizaveta and turned right back around. Disagree. He calls her wily, and Alina seemed like a complete idiot a lot of the time, at least to me. So I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, they decide that they're going to have to find a secure location, and she is going to go off and miss the wedding, which obviously she is kind of eager to do because it's going to be awful for her. And she goes and tells Genya, who understandably is just like, are you kidding? Are you really going to like... I can't believe that we're even considering this. But in the end, Genya asks David what he thinks. And David considers, and then, as I had said earlier, is basically like, it's worth trying. You know, it's just... I've been reading through the research that Tolia and Yuri did. It's mostly religion, fanciful saints' tales, and very little science, but there's a pattern there, something I can't quite make out. The small science has always been about keeping power in check and maintaining the Grisha bond. The fold was a violation of that. That rupture has never actually been healed, and I don't know if the Obispaya will be enough. But those old stories, they're all bound up together. So this is a moment where she's thinking back on what she used to be like. Especially the mention of Alina has sort of dredged this up for her. And she's thinking about how she hadn't wanted to work with Genya or David and had thought eventually she'd be able to sort of wear them down and get them to do what she wanted. And she's realizing how she misjudged so dramatically that she didn't need help, that she didn't need their support, that they weren't intelligent enough to be worth like their contributions. And it's just all of it, this reflection on how she used to be, considering what she was like when we read the other 3 books. And from Alina's perspective, she was just so haughty and sometimes outright cruel. She has a moment here thinking about the way that she treated Genya. And I love how honest she is about everything. Remember, Zoya, he wasn't teaching you to fight for yourself, but in his service. We had only punishment for those who dared to speak against him. He was the reason for Genya's scars, for all the pain she'd endured. No, that wasn't true. Zoya had known what Genya was forced to suffer when they were just girls. Everyone had. But the other Grisha hadn't comforted her or cared for her. They'd mocked her, sneered at her, excluded her from their meals and the circle of their friendship. They'd left her unforgivably alone. Zoya had been the worst of them. The Darkling wasn't the only one who owed penance. But I can change that now, Zoya vowed. I can make sure he never returns here. She let herself rest her cheek against the silky top of Genya's head and made them both a promise. Wherever this adventure led, the Darkling wasn't coming back from it. And that is the end of her chapter. But I just always appreciate when a character is allowed to grow and, you know, they might have been a snot and they're maybe still a snot in some ways, but they are realizing what they were like. And it isn't just, oh, well, I'm different now. They feel a genuine, like, need to make it right. It's not water under the bridge. They are still bothered by their past behavior. Because I feel like that's, to me, more evidence that they are becoming a better person than otherwise. It's very easy for people who suck to be like, oh, the past is the past. You can only say that because you don't really understand the damage you did. And if you don't really understand it, there's no possible way for you to be adequately sorry for it. That's just my opinion. So I love this. Zoya is just my fucking heart. I love her so much. She's like one of my favorites. Put her and Steris Harms together from Mistborn, and I'm just like, all right. So I'm going to wrap. Oh, Cheryl's here. I'm so sorry, Cheryl. I didn't even see you were here until just now. She says, I like how Alexander was like, what name suggests my benevolence and my care for all Grisha? Got it. Darkling. Yeah, I think maybe he thought like adding ling to the end of it made it cute, less threatening, but no, sir. But yeah, thank you again, Joanna, very much for commissioning this. I am just enjoying this one so much. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.